When it comes to movies that are infamous for scaring the pants off of children, and maybe even a few adults, there are very few that can stand up to the likes of Coraline. Appearing to be very sweet and kid-friendly at first, before revealing itself to be something a lot darker, just like the beldam herself, there are very few kids' movies out there that can match it. Because when the scares start coming, it doesn't hold anything back, including depicting the deaths of a few sympathetic characters. But that being said, there are a few children's movies that can be considered in the same league as it, as far as being pretty dang terrifying goes, with one of the more unlikely ones actually being Scooby Doo on Zombie Island. Because while it has plenty of trademark Scooby-Doo slapstick and humor to be had, it's similarly not afraid to get very dark and grim, especially towards the end when it's revealed that not only are the zombies real, but just how they came to be zombies in the first place. And it's so terrifying, in fact, that one almost can't help but wonder if it achieved the impossible and managed to be an even scarier children's film than Coraline. And today, I'd like to compare and contrast these two movies and see which one of them is the more terrifying one. And there are going to be spoilers for both these movies ahead, so in case you don't want something else ruined, you should probably not proceed with this video. Okay, so to start off simply, both these movies are way scarier than your average kid's movie. There's no denying that. I even talked at length about how scary both of them are in their own separate videos, and you can find links to both of them in the description. Because among other things, both contain pleasant and human-looking characters hideously transforming into grotesque monsters on screen, have very unsettling depictions of ghosts, and, of course, every child's favorite topic, eternal enslavement of the soul. Seriously, what happens to the zombies and the ghost children in their respective movies is such a horrifying prospect that it could give adults nightmares. So the point is, neither of these movies are for the faint of heart, and really push the limits of being scary while also still being appropriate for kids. But honestly, if I had to pick which one is scarier, I would have to say, while being as fair and objective as possible, that the edge would have to go to Coraline. And that's mainly because while having its fair share of terrifying moments, Scooby Doo on Zombie Island is really a lighter movie overall. Because as I already mentioned, not only does the classic Scooby Doo humor help lighten the mood after many of the scares, but things don't start getting truly scary until the zombies start showing up in the third act. While Coraline, by contrast, transitions to a much darker tone at the halfway point, and moreover commits a lot heavier to its darker nature. Because while there are also plenty of moments of levity, especially in the first half, it's also not afraid to get really serious when the situation calls for it, with the humor and joy it did have being sucked right out once Coraline realizes her parents are missing and doesn't return at all until the end. And for an excellent example to demonstrate this point, let's take a look at the climax of their respective movies. Because in Coraline, not only is her confrontation with the other mother played dead straight, but the stakes in this scene are extremely high. There's nothing to lighten the mood here, and there hasn't been for quite some time. as a result, every passing development only makes things more tense, to the point that once she's actively escaping, you're left genuinely horrified at the thought that she might not make it. And this is all done so effectively that it seamlessly carries over to the final confrontation with her hand, where once again, there's no levity at all, and sweet relief only comes once YB crushes it and they've thrown it all down the well. And even then, those unsettling feelings continue to linger into the end of the film. To put it simply, not only does this movie know when to be serious, but how to keep building tension with every passing scene. While by contrast, in Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, there's a lot more flip-flopping between the horrifying realization of what's going on and trademark Scooby-Doo antics. Like Simone and Lena fully transform into cat monsters and are about to drain the gang of their souls before Shaggy and Scooby crash into them and Shaggy asks if they're playing charades. Or when Shaggy and Scooby are about to have their souls drained by the pair, only for them to start cartoonishly beating each other up because Daphne and Velma have turned their voodoo dolls against them. The point is, Coraline almost continually builds tension from about the halfway point, which only helps make a pretty terrifying situation even scarier, while Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island engages in a lot more mood whiplash, which, while still being scary, does help keep things a lot lighter. But all of this isn't to say that Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is a badly written movie because of the way it handles its humor. Because ultimately, it's a very different movie than Coraline, and is simply doing what it does best, being a slightly darker take on Scooby-Doo. So as a result, to not have quite a bit of levity, even at the climax, would be a bad thing because it's not what Scooby-Doo is all about. Just because it worked perfectly in Coraline doesn't mean it would have worked in a Scooby-Doo movie. Slapstick and cartoonish antics are a core aspect of Scooby-Doo, and the movie was better off embracing that. Especially because one has to keep in mind that this is a kids' movie, so having a bit of levity after all the terror on display would honestly be welcomed by most. The only point I was trying to make here is that the combination of high stakes and Scooby-Doo antics, in contrast to Coraline's dead serious approach, simply makes the stop-motion movie scarier, not that it's an infinitely superior film. But getting back on topic, another reason why Coraline is arguably scarier than Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island lies in their respective monsters. Because while the zombies themselves are terrifying, especially to little children, as well as the cat creatures themselves, there's thankfully a certain level of artificiality to them as befitting Scooby-Doo. As in, they're not really based on any pre-existing stories or myths. The movie simply makes up their cat god and the powers that it gave them. So as a result, while it's all still a pretty scary revelation to swallow, it's also easier to subconsciously take comfort in the fact that none of it is real. Because as I just pointed out, the cat god, the cat creatures themselves, none of that has any basis in real-world mythology. It's all stuff the writers simply came up with to tell the best story they could. And though it might not be much, that can allow for a bit of subconscious relief in the audience. Though obviously this applies more to older people, as children are more apt to believe in anything they see. But with the Bell Dam, it's a different story entirely. Because as I went into in another video, which you can also find a link in the description too, the other mother is based heavily in ancient folklore, even if the movie itself never acknowledges it. Even her real name, the Beldam, has its roots in ancient stories about a creature that lures children to their doom. So as a result, the other mother manages to somehow be even scarier the deeper you look into her. Because in many ways, she comes across as less of a monster and more like some mythical creature or demon hiding in the woods just waiting for the right moment to strike. And not to mention, her behavior also mirrors that of many real-life predators, preying on naive children with excellent manipulation skills and giving them seemingly amazing things so that they'll trust them before ultimately doing horrible things to them. As I just said, the other mother evokes something a lot more primal in her fear factor. And that's even before factoring in her otherworldly powers and the fact that she thrives on enslaving children's souls. So as a result, though it is ultimately a close race, don't get me wrong, the Beldam is arguably a more terrifying villain than Simone and Lena, if only because that subconscious comfort isn't there with the other mother, and if anything, is likely to only be scarier when viewed through that kind of subtext. Now, there are other reasons I could get into for why Coraline is arguably the scarier of the two movies, such as it feeling a lot more foreboding right from the start, or even the fact that it has a more washed out color palette compared to Scooby Doo. But I think I've already proven my point here. And I would just like to once again note that I wasn't arguing that Coraline was a better movie, simply that it's the scarier film. Though at the same time, and as I noted at the beginning, no matter which one was more frightening, nothing changes the fact that both movies are honestly a lot more terrifying than most children's films have any right to be, especially when it comes to the fates of the villain's previous victims. Seriously, the fact that they have a body count at all is already something, but being stuck in such a horrifying state of limbo for all eternity? Though surprisingly, I wouldn't say that either of these movies are scary enough to be inappropriate for children to watch, as they do accommodate them in important ways. Not that it probably still didn't leave a few of them traumatized, as well as quite a few adults, considering some of the underlying implications both these movies have. But regardless of how frightening they are individually, the point is that when looked at solely for how scary each of them are, Coraline does win by a pretty large margin. Okay, that's everything I had to say on that. So now why don't all of you tell me? Do you think that Coraline is a scarier children's movie than Scooby Doo on Zombie Island? Or do you believe the Great Dane actually managed to tell the more terrifying story? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as I always say, you do not have to agree with this video just because you watched it. You are entitled to your own opinion and can feel any way about both movies discussed here that you want to, and I nor anybody else can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. I very appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.